Yeah, you're listening to the Up Rev Ninja podcast, and this is episode number 44.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Up Rev Ninja podcast. If this is your first time listening, thanks for joining us. This show is produced each week with the single intent of discovering the tips, tricks, hacks, and lessons learned from our guests that has catapulted them into living the best version of themselves. Join your host, Tom Hudson, as he continues his search for the best methods to up-rev his life. Now, let's dive into the show.
Today's guest is Courtney Carver. Courtney changed her life by simplifying it after a devastating diagnosis in 2006. She's a founder of BeMoreWithLess.com and Minimalist Fashion Challenge Project 333. Her new book, Soulful Simplicity, was published by Penguin Random House. Carver shows us the power of simplicity to improve our health, build more meaningful relationships, and relieve stress in our professional and personal lives. Hey, today on the Up Rev Ninja podcast, I've got Courtney Carver with me. How you doing today, Courtney?
Very good, thank you.
It's you were out here in Boston is January, right?
Yeah, that feels like a long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, time does fly, but it was rather embarrassing for my wife and I. We were so excited to see you, and on our way down, we live just over an hour north, and there was an accident or something, and we sat there for like 2 hours, and we were about a mile away from you, but we couldn't get off the highway. So we were the last ones to walk in, and we were like, oh man, this is so embarrassing. But regardless, it's turned out to be a good thing. So but before I digress, why don't you tell us like who you are and how you got to this point writing your latest book?
Sure. Well, my latest book is called Soulful Simplicity, and that's how you and I met at the Soulful Simplicity book tour. But the book started many years ago, as most books do. And the whole thing kind of kicked off back in 2006 for me, long before I was blogging or even thinking about blogging. I was working living a pretty typical American dream lifestyle, deep in debt, working way too much to appreciate my life, and just always felt like I was overextended in every area of my life. And without going into too much detail, I'll just say that I was running crazy, and it all kind of came to a screeching halt in 2006 when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And that was sort of my wake-up call, I guess, or at least the wake-up call that I could not ignore. And from that moment forward, I was on a mission to figure out how to live well with MS and how to eliminate stress, because I, through my research, kind of figured that that would be the best way to go. And little did I know, I wouldn't only live well with MS, but change my entire life by reducing stress and simplifying every area of my life.
Now you started your blog. It was 2010, correct?
2010, right.
So what transpired between 2006 and 2010?
Well, even once I started blogging in 2010, I hadn't figured it all out, I guess. It's not like I had, I wasn't even debt free or clutter free or any of the things you might want to be or think you want to be before you start a blog about simplicity. But it was important to me to start it there, because I think people can better connect with you when they know you are still on the path and trying to figure things out. And I still consider myself in that arena. There's always something new to learn and change and experiment with. So between 2006 and 2010, that was a really important time for me, because I was kind of figuring out the new normal with MS, what had to change, and learning a lot about myself. Once I realized that I wasn't a victim of the disease, nor was I guess, employed by the doctors, because that's what it kind of felt like at first, that I just had to do what they said, and no matter how they said it or what they offered or what I thought about it. And that was all my own doing. In thinking about that, I think we're often intimidated by medical professionals. But once I realized that I had a say in this, and really I knew my body better than anyone else, I became my own advocate. And that changed everything, not just in the health scene for me, but all areas of life.
So, during that time, what was, was there a primary emotion that was kind of holding you back, or just, social conditioning, like, fear, procrastination, or I know part of the story you shared with us back in January was, you've got this, big, nice corporate job, right? And you're working a million hours, and then you did this transition. Um, I assume you had people in your life telling you essentially you were crazy, for making such a jump. What kind of, what happened with you going through that? Did what kind of self doubts did you have? That negative self talk? How did you get through that?
Yeah, well, people tell me I'm crazy all the time, and I've come to look at it as a compliment. Uh, and I think what they really mean is you're willing to do unconventional things, and or at least to consider them.
Right.
And that doesn't feel good for a lot of people, and it felt uncomfortable for me at first too. There was so much fear around my diagnosis that when I finally started to take action, there was very little fear of uncertainty, because I mean, I was kind of facing all the uncertainty that I could and moving through it okay. So I had a lot of confidence that even if things didn't go as planned, which they rarely do, everything would be okay. So I guess the emotion or the emotional side of this for me was really mostly in the beginning, like trying to figure out what my life was going to look like. How was it going to change? And finally coming to a point where I knew I didn't know the answers to that, and I just had to move forward anyway.
Oh, that's great, though. I mean, look, it's been 12 years, and look what's been accomplished in that period of time, right?
Yeah, I mean, everything's different. And I
Hey,
mean, my health, just to talk about that, is remarkable. Like, I'm healthier now than I was before my MS diagnosis.
wow, that's powerful. That's a powerful statement in just regards to, what you've accomplished. I know, pre-show we talked about yoga just super briefly. When did you start getting into yoga? Had you been doing that prior to 2006, or was that afterwards?
No, in fact, someone recommended that I take a yoga class shortly after my diagnosis.
Yeah.
And I was a little bit offended, because I thought, here I am trying to be strong, and you want me to slow down and take a yoga class. Of course, little did I know,
Yeah.
yoga is challenging in more ways than one, including physical. So I took my first class probably in late 2006 or early 2007. And I liked it so much that I signed up for a private session with a teacher that I had taken a class with. And that really just set me on a lifelong yoga path. Uh, Really, just it's a part of who I am now, and not like handstands and anything fancy, but just consistently coming back to my yoga mat and figuring out how I can take that feeling that I feel when I'm on the yoga mat into the world with me on any given day.
Well, I know in the Yoga Sutras they talk about that constant practice, and it's definitely. I can tell days that I don't, meditate or do yoga or do some facet of yoga. If I skip it for whatever reason, I can definitely tell at the end of the day. So would you, I guess, one of the questions I have is, kind of what makes you a ninja? I mean, you transformed your entire life and, your families as well, over the last 12 years. Yeah, I know yoga was a part of that. Obviously, you started your blog. You've written, your soulful simplicity. But what keeps you on track? What keeps you in that, neutral to positive mindset and keep moving forward? And just, you don't want to throw the towel in. What keeps you on goal?
Yeah, a couple things. One is love, for sure. The love that I have for myself, and the love that and support that I get from my family, the love of my work. It's a strong element in all of this. and one that was probably missing, not from my family by any means, but for sure in my work that I was doing and in how I was living my life. But now I'm much more aligned with what I believe in, who I am. I remember what's important to me, what matters to me, and I guess really walking the walk is keeps me super connected to moving forward. And then the next thing is consistency over intensity. It makes all the difference for me. For instance, my morning routine is really important to me. It's something I've been practicing since 2006. But on this recent book tour, when I was traveling, it was hard to, really get in an hour or two, which I like to do every day. So instead, there were some mornings where I would only do 5 minutes. And the old me would have been like, 5 minutes? Are you out of your mind? Why bother?
Right.
But now I know that just that 5 minutes keeps me connected to the practice and makes me really excited to get back to the 1 to 2 hours or 2 to 3 hours on a good day.
Yeah, I'm not going to use the B word, but I would love to do 2 to 3 hours. I'm not able to do that.
Hey, I couldn't at first either. My morning routine really did start 5 minutes and I built up to a half hour. And that was, when my daughter was younger and I was taking her to school and I was working full time and my life was the B word as well. And 30 minutes was it, but it made room for so much more. And now that I have more time, I practice longer.
Well, you bring up your daughter, and I definitely had a couple of questions I wanted to ask you about, kind of, I know this is your perspective, but some of the journey that she had to go through. Um, when I was reading your book, I might miss some of the dates here, but I remember when you moved into like the 600 or 750 square foot apartment or condo. How was that for her? Like, how old was she at that point?
Yes, so we downsized into our apartment probably, I want to say it was May of 2013. And she graduated from high school that June.
Okay.
So she moved with us, obviously was there all through the summer, and then she started school and was living in the dorms and then coming home when she wasn't in school.
Okay.
So it because I think she had kind of been on the path with us from the get-go, since she was, I think, 11 or 12 years old when we started all of this. It wasn't a backward step, I guess,
Right.
for her. And she liked it because it moved us into the city. She was closer to friends. She still had obviously her own space. So yeah, I don't think it was negative in any way, or at least she hasn't shared that with me.
No, it's just, I've got a 13-year-old and just kind of curious, if we were to do this, my wife and I've been talking about this, one of our goals is to do something super similar once she gets out of high school. So we're kind of on the same trajectory, I guess. But we kind of want our home to be like, the teenage hangout and, friendly and stuff. And we're like, how would that happen if we were to downsize right now? So that's kind of where that question came from. But and I know it's so funny again how much time has passed and how different the world is. Um, the iPhone is what 10 years old now, or almost 11. Not everyone had one. Everyone has an iPhone now. If you're 9 years old or older, you have a smartphone almost. So I know the other item that you kind of talked about was your daughter's free time. When before you moved into the before you downsized, but how did you structure that downtime? I know something parents struggle with today is you've got, something we didn't have 10 years ago. You have Netflix, you have Hulu, you can watch any show anytime without commercials, back to back. You can binge watch. You've got Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You've got all the stuff that's always happening. And I know parents kind of struggle with that now. Like, how do I give my child freedom, but at the same time have them do no harm to themselves by just constantly having screen time. How did that, was that a challenge for you, or?
I don't know if I really, I'm trying to think if that was really as big of a deal as it was just like being overscheduled, her being overscheduled. That's what I really tried to back away from. And it wasn't her screen time that was the problem, it was mine.
Okay. Yeah.
So it was me not being able to pay attention to her because I had my head down on the phone or in my computer or whatever. So for me, it was more about changing my habits than changing her habits. And I think that's almost more powerful, depending on how old the child is, but especially if they're a little bit older, watching your parents change their habits is more impactful than your parents telling you to change your habits.
True.
Because I don't know how many times I've heard parents telling their kids to get off their phone while they're on their phone. Like
Right.
the message doesn't click if we're not living the message. So for me, it was really important as I simplified and started to pare down. And even before that, with the phone, to separate myself from the phone when I was talking to my daughter so that she didn't have to compete for my attention and so that I could show up for her. That was more important to me than monitoring her screen time.
Yeah.
But I do remember really watching that, like kind of her activities and making sure, there was a lot of pressure to make sure your kids are in every activity and that they're well-rounded and you can send them into the world to be these amazing humans. But I think we're creating resumes for a life that perhaps our kids don't even want.
Yep.
And maybe what might be better for them today is the freedom to get bored and be curious and to play and to do what they want for a little bit rather than having their lives scheduled all day long.
Yeah, I love what you just said, the freedom to get bored. That's I definitely got bored as a kid. Like you had like five TV stations to choose from, right? And other than like Saturday morning cartoons, which I don't even think is a thing anymore, there was nothing on TV for me. And I didn't have constant communication with anyone as a child. So I think that freedom to get bored and to learn how to use your imagination is so paramount for anyone. So
Yeah, even for adults now, like we don't give ourselves a chance to get bored either. Like as soon as we feel bored, we, you know, fill that space and so much comes out of that boredom or emptiness or whatever you want to call it.
well, it is pretty amazing. There was one thing in the book that you shared. I consider myself, you know, uh, life hacker, trying to always, maximize the amount of value I get with a minimal amount of time. And one thing in your book, I laughed out loud reading it, and I was on a, I was surrounded by people, and everyone kind of looked up at me. You had mentioned you wanted to have a laptop set up in your car like you see in police officers' cars.
I sure did.
And I was like, okay, I've not gone that far, and I've never even thought about that. But that speaks volumes about how busy you wanted to be, and the lifestyle that you've come from. I mean, if that was something you contemplated at one point to where you're at now, I mean, that's, if you could go more than 180 degrees, gone more than 180 degrees. So
Yeah, I mean, I just thought then, I thought this is crazy. Like I'm emailing on my phone and driving, and it's really a challenge. If I had a laptop, it would be so much easier. Uh, yeah, 180 plus many degrees.
absolutely. Well, so obviously, you're a writer, and books help influence me personally. What about you? What have been some books that have helped influence you, or and that doesn't have to be anything around productivity or anything like that. But what are some of your favorite books?
Yeah, well, one book that made a big difference in my life and continues to do so is called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron.
Okay.
And I started reading this book long before any of this happened, pre 2006. I don't even remember the first time I read it because I always wanted to be more creative. I just didn't know how to do it or how to get there with my life the way it was. And so that really stuck with me. And I've read it several times since. There's also two other books, and they're both older books, but uh, really powerful in my life. One's called Your Money or Your Life. And the other one is What Should I Do with My Life?
Okay.
By Poe Bronson.
All right. Um, Sorry, I'm just taking some notes there. Okay. Well, what about what's kind of pushed you out of your comfort zone? You've gone through a lot, but to always keep your edge and to be moving. Um, what do you do to make sure you're not becoming stagnant?
Oh, wow.
Uh-oh.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, one thing, and I don't know if this really answers the question or not,
Yeah.
but I'm out of my comfort zone right now quite a bit because I just have, finished this book tour
Right.
so just kind of wrapping up a project that I've spent the last 2+ years working on pretty regularly, and doing a lot of press and travel and a lot of things around the book. And so all those things are kind of falling away. And I have a lot of ideas, things that I want to create, next things, but I'm not ready.
Okay.
I'm just not ready to do that. And I feel uncomfortable waiting because I don't know what I'm waiting for. And I know it's not procrastination. I just know it's not the right time, and that I have to sit here and wait to figure out why I'm waiting. It sounds nuts, but
No, yeah, I get that.
it's very uncomfortable. But anytime I kind of think about it or write about it and I lean into it, it feels okay. But if it's just my ego running the show, it's like, come on, it's time for the next thing. Let's get going. But if I do a little breathing, take a walk, connect to my heart, I'm like, that's all right. We don't have to go anywhere today.
Well,
Today yeah.
I can imagine over the last year, 2 years or so, with everything that you've experienced, and if I recall, um, y- you you've stated you're an introvert, right?
I am.
Okay, so everything that you've gone through over the last couple of years is you're baking a really awesome quiche right now. It's inside of you, it's baking, it's getting ready, and it's going to come out, and you're going to have something phenomenal. Once that's coming out of the oven. Horrible metaphor, but hey, like
Eh,
you know, um,
Somebody told me I was in an incubator recently,
okay.
and I'm like, okay, so oven, incubator.
Well, so what do you feel? I know one of the things you shared was being a part of nature, and you just mentioned this as well. Connecting with your heart. Doing the hand over hearts exercise. But what other personal habits do you have that you really feel contribute to your continual personal growth?
I pay attention to what I eat. I think that's really important. And that's not to say that I always eat the right things or the things that are best for me in terms of health. Um, but often I do because I'm paying attention. So that I think really helps. And then just daily habits, my morning routine, which includes a combination of writing, yoga, meditation, walking, sometimes some reading or writing a thank you note. Just having that time to myself every day makes a huge difference in how I navigate the rest of the day.
Well, so you talk about diet, and I travel quite a bit, and I know you talk about athletic greens, and that's something I've had incorporated in my diet for well over a couple of years now. But how was it traveling on the road, going to these book signings? It's so hard for me to eat healthy. To find a juice bar or something like that. How was that for you? How did you manage that?
Travel is always more challenging for me to eat healthy, not because I can't find it, because I don't want to. I used to always think of travel as like, I'm on vacation. I want to eat all the fun food or the local food or whatever. But this time was probably one of the healthiest in terms of food because going into it, I really dialed things down and did mostly Whole30 eating during like November and December, which are normally like just free-for-alls for me.
Okay.
The holiday months, just, eating a lot of sugar and drinking and eating and having more celebratory food. And I pulled back from that this year, knowing that I'd be traveling a bunch and just really wanting to stay clear and focused in advance of that and be very healthy for it. So that really helped, because when I went and started traveling, I had been off most sugar and didn't have a lot of cravings. And so it was much easier for me to eat, a nice piece of fish and some greens and a potato for dinner versus pasta or I don't know what.
Yeah, well, you were in Boston. Did you go to the North End?
No, I didn't actually. And normally I would, especially if it was summer, but it was kind of rainy and I wasn't there very long. I think I was only actually there one night. So I didn't have time to get in trouble in Boston.
That's a good thing. It's a good thing.
But
So,
yeah.
No, go ahead, Courtney.
I was just going to say the other thing that really helps me is saying no, even when it's uncomfortable to do so. So I say no to a lot of things, and that really helps me stay focused on being creative or spending time with my family or having my morning routine. Just by saying no or no thank you to a lot more than I say yes to.
I think you just answered my next question. I was going to ask you, how do you balance everything that you have going on? So it sounds like that's probably the answer right there.
Yeah, it is. And I don't focus on balancing it. I kind of think like I've never seen my life in perfect balance before. I mean, when my daughter was really like a baby, I remember feeling like a terrible mother when I was at work, or when I was home, like a terrible employee. I was never very good at all things at the same time. And I don't strive to be that. I just want to be good at what I'm doing when I'm doing it. And if other things have to slide a little, that's fine.
All right. Well, so let's say there's someone in the audience today, and they're listening, and they've heard your journey, and they're inspired, but they don't know where to start. What kind of guidance could you give them?
This is such an interesting question. I used to always say there's no right place to start. You just start somewhere.
Yeah.
But I know that's so vague that especially if you're really overwhelmed and not sure where to go, it's nice to have a step one. And so now what I always recommend, step one, is carving out 5 minutes a day to sit quietly. And if you're open to it, put your hands on your heart, without any expectation of anything. Just commit to the practice for maybe 10 days, 5 minutes a day. Sit down, take a few deep breaths, and put your hands on your heart. I think without me even saying another word about it, something will come from that. And if nothing but you getting 5 minutes to yourself every day comes from it, that's an enormous benefit for a lot of people.
I agree. I think we bookend our days, or schedule them beyond what we are capable of truly handling. So, well, Courtney, in the show notes, I'll list all the different ways to contact you. But what's your preferred method?
Probably the blog,
Yeah.
bemorewithless.com. And from there, you can find whatever you need.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And we did kind of touch on this. You're incubating right now. Your next idea or project is, anything on the horizon, or anything that you've kind of got your next blog post that you're thinking about that's coming out.
I mean, I've got a lot of things that are on my mind. They're just not ready quite yet. But one thing that we have going on right now is this year-long course that I offer called Simple Year. We've just decided to open it up for a couple more weeks for people who weren't quite ready at the beginning of the year and now are thinking this year is out of hand. Maybe it is time to simplify and I need some help. So we're opening that up through March 19th.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you. And so is there anything that we haven't discussed that you'd be remiss if we didn't talk about?
I don't think so. I loved our conversation, but I think we covered it all for today.
Well, thank you very much. Like I said, since we, met back in January, I've been very excited, and my wife, both and I, we finished your book, and it's where some of the questions came from. And thank you very much for your time and consideration, and for coming on today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I ran into Courtney last January at a book signing in Boston, so I've been looking forward to this interview for a while since then. A lot of good takeaways from this interview. She talked about yoga. We got into that a lot, but really got down to love, self-belief, and walking the walk. And I love one thing that she said about her morning routine. Start at 5 minutes and just build it up. And I think she said she's up to 3 hours at some times, but the key thing there was consistency over intensity. And one of the big challenges for me is traveling and trying to eat healthy. And, we dive into that. And I loved, that she really had, a pretty good answer with that. And then just everything else, I just, there's so many good nuggets in this. And, just really enjoyed speaking with Courtney. What were some of your key takeaways? What did you learn from this?
Thanks for listening to the UpRev Ninja podcast with your host, Tom Hudson. Navigate to our website at uprev.ninja today, where you will find additional resources to help you discover the best version of you. While you're there, join our newsletter and join the discussion on your favorite social media platforms. We've got some awesome guests lined up to share with us how they are becoming the best versions of themselves. Again, thank you for listening. Now it's time to go out and uprev your life.